A very good evening. On behalf of India FinTech Forum, I am Vishal Bagadia, and today we have with us Kanika Agarwal, co-founder and CIO of Upside AI, a fintech startup that aims to revolutionize the investment space with the help of machine learning. Kanika is a rank holder, chartered accountant, and a CFA charter holder and a commerce graduate from Mumbai University. She has over 11 years of experience in finance and investing, having worked with with companies including Mayfield India, Credit Suisse, and EY. Hello, ma'am. Welcome to our FinTech Leadership Series.
Hi, Vishal. Very happy to be here. Excited to talk to you guys.
Thank you, ma'am. So, Upside AI is an investment company that uses machine learning and fundamental analysis to invest in the Indian stock market.
Yeah.
Would you like to share with our audience how your product works?
Sure. For us, our inspiration was actually Benjamin Graham, Warren Buffett, true value investors, if you will. There's actually this quote by Buffett right at the beginning of Intelligent Investor when he introduces it, where what he's saying is that to be a good investor, you don't need to be particularly smart, right? All you need is a sound intellectual framework, and you make sure emotions don't corrode it. Right, and that sounds easier said than done. As humans are constantly corroding our frameworks with our biases and emotions. Right, March 2020, do you buy, do you sell? Are you just paralyzed with fear? What are you supposed to be doing? Oh, I should have bought this time. Oh, I should have sold this time. I knew it, but I didn't do it. There's all of this that's perpetually happening. And for us, when we started, we said, what's the best way to keep biases out of investing? And that was really the use of technology, and that was the sort of starting point. And we started looking to the West because using tech in investing is not something new I've come up with, right? It's been around for decades. When you look to the US, for example, there is a very clear shift away from humans into rules-based investing, right? So, and that's true across ticket sizes. So if I'm looking at the mutual fund level, right, where you're doing retail ticket sizes, that's moving into ETFs, right, which are rules-based products. You go slightly higher into hedge funds, your top 5 hedge funds in the world are all quants now. So money is moving again from people into quants. So you're seeing all of that happening, and then you come back, and in India, what we think technology in investing means is high frequency trading or technicals, right? Thousands of trades a second or reading some price volume charting sort of stuff. But most equity allocation that all of us are putting into the markets is going to humans who are essentially saying, hey, listen, trust my gut, trust my intuition to find the best industry management company out there, and I'll generate alpha. That's the mutual funds. And what we've seen is, and actually S&P did a study on this, that 80% of mutual funds have underperformed their index in the last 5 years, right? And this is true for mutual funds, for PMSs. All human investors essentially revert to mean. This is true in India, this is true in the US. So for us, we said, if 90% of equity allocation is going to human fundamental investors, and we believe that process is broken, can you fix that? Can you teach a machine how to read P&L, balance sheet, cash flow data, and figure out what it means to be good in current market conditions? And that's really what we've ended up building. So very, very long story short, we are fundamental investors, but we believe machines will do a better job than humans at this process. And that is why we're trying to teach machines how to read financials, read macro data, figure out what it means to be good in current markets.
Okay, so talking about the process of how your algorithm works, it runs basically 50 million iterations and generate a portfolio of approximately 10 to 25 stocks for a client, right? So what is the frequency with which the suggestion that is being made by the algorithm is changed? That is like how long can a user expect a particular company to remain in that portfolio?
Yeah. So depends from product to product. We run a couple of products on the same technology. We do a multi-cap, which is mid-small cap focused, and we do a top 250, which is large mid-cap focused. So on the multi-cap, we rebalance every quarter. Our main trigger to rebalance is quarterly results, right? Any client should expect the stocks to be in his portfolio for about 3 months. So this is like I was saying, just because it's tech doesn't mean I'm trading every week. Right, it's still 3 months or so is what we say it should do, and that is far more than a human should do for sure, right? As a person, we should not make a decision every 3 months, right? We'll do a really poor job. But with a machine, because it's ruthless and unbiased, you wanted to make decisions, as often as is optimal. And what optimal means is what's your trade-off between what's the return that you can generate with making a new decision versus what it costs you, right? And that's constantly, the balance we're trying to strike. So where we've ended up is on the multi-cap, we do this every quarter, or on the top 250, which is a large and mid-cap product, we churn once a year. Someone comes in, they stick around. That portfolio is a, long-term 12-month product, and then churned once a year. And every different products will have different sort of approaches, but on these two, that's what we're doing.
So these products are generalized, or it tries to suggest an individual-based portfolio based upon their risk profile.
Right. No, they are not. They are generalized. So when someone comes to us and says, "Hey, this is my risk profile," we read it, and based on that, suggest a product that makes sense for them. Right. So a mid and small cap product may not make sense for someone who's 75 years old and looking for a more fixed income sort of steady income securities. Someone who's 25 and has a lot more risk and owns absolutely no equities, that's a great product for them to be doing. So depending on who they are and where they are in life, many times we say no to clients, saying, "Hey, listen, 50 lakhs is a large ticket size for you. If you come into my product, you will have all your equity exposure will be this one product. So don't come to us." And we actually do detailed risk profiling with everyone who comes in, and whether only if the product makes sense for them do we sell it to them. Otherwise, we don't sell it to them in any case. So and exactly to your point, currently we have these equity products, but the kind of stuff we're working on is to be able to offer products for broader risk profiles, right? So the next one we're going to start trialing is actually an asset allocator, which reads macro signals. So, interest rates, liquidity, all sorts of things to figure out what should be your allocation between equity, debt, and gold, right? And what you want to do there is have it be a very low risk product, but can deliver maybe somewhere between 10 and 15% returns consistently. So that might work for someone that's older. So have products at every point in the risk spectrum that will make sense for you.
Okay, so talking about the identification of a particular stocks, so there are various factors on which a particular stock can be identified, whether it's a good investment or not. So, and one of the key metrics is like companies which are consistent compounders tend to have a good management quality. So, does the algorithm identify such stocks, or the current algorithm is still restricted on the numbers only?
Yeah. We are a numbers only product. It is bottom up. Our very strong belief is that management quality shows up either in fundamental performance, right? How your financials are moved, or in your valuations, or in your stock price movement. Somewhere management quality shows up. And this is true across the board, right? Even before DHFL broke or the scam broke, it always traded at a discount to its peers. So that there's something wrong with that company. Generally true. So for us, when we said we want to go in and do only quantitative work, we're genuinely only doing quantitative work. The only place manual intervention does get involved is at the end where we're making corporate governance calls, right? I don't want to buy kachra in the portfolio. So that's the only thing we will throw out. So if the algo throws up, 15 stocks on average, and there may be a stock in there where I'm not comfortable with the reliability of those numbers, we won't buy it. But that's so I'm never going to take a call on what I think of steel as a sector, right? But I will take a call on whether that management is reliable and can we buy that stock. So there's no automated buying or selling that happens. There is, I make the final decision on whether we're buying something or not.
So, like past 1 year has been quite volatile, and we have seen quite a bullish trend in the market, and the main sectors like IT and pharma has been benefited hugely from it. So, while in March 2020, did the AI able to identify that anything of this sort is going to happen, given the COVID is in the picture, and the stocks in the IT or pharma sector is bound to rally or something like that?
Sure. So we rebalance every quarter, right? So exactly to what you're saying, those trends keep emerging. There are always new trends that emerge. So in March, we were buying in the middle of the free fall around mid-March. You don't know where the bottom is. And when you run the system, it says, hey, there's no reason to sit in cash. What we're actually going to do is buy these 10 stocks. what's common across them is they're all net cash companies, right? No debt on their books, high ROEs, and relatively high Ps compared to market, but we're fine. And turns out a lot of them are specialty chemicals, right? Which benefit from China plus one export oriented policies. And, lo and behold, March you fall a lot because everyone is falling. But April, your bounce back is 1.5 times the market. Market goes up 14%, you're up 22%. Right? Come July and you're rebalancing again, it's seeing better trends in cyclicals, right? It's saying let's move to auto ancillary. And that quarter, by the way, was great for auto. From December onwards, our heaviest allocation has been to metals and mining. Right? So JSW Steel was our biggest position in December. And even now, we continue to hold a lot of metals positions. I think it's about 25% of the portfolio. So generally, and IT and pharma, by the way, consistently are at about 10-15% in the portfolio. So they constantly are in the portfolios. But idea is to say that while fundamentals don't dramatically change, it's not like from March to June, fundamentals change so much that you have to make a new decision. But how market reacts to those fundamentals keeps changing. So what market defines as good is constantly new. So can you learn that and pick something new based on feedback from what market regime is telling you? So yes, we did pick some auto and pharma, but we also picked lots of different sectors that did reasonably well for us.
So as you mentioned that the portfolio is rebalanced every quarter. So there is an opportunity to the other investors regarding the efficient market theory, like the price corrections happen real time basis. So in that case, do you think that it gives an edge to other investors, given that your portfolio is revised quarter to quarter basis?
Right. So are you saying that someone could, arbitrage our portfolios?
Not arbitrage, actually. Let's say big news has broken out during the quarter. So in that case, the other investor might get an edge, given they can rebalance their portfolio at that particular point of time.
Sure. Yes, they can. And that happens all the time, right? You buy 15 stocks, there will be some news that breaks out about something. So for example, we bought a stock in Jan, they announced CapEx, and that stock fell 10% on that day. So what are you supposed to do? And what we do is nothing, right? Our stand is very clear in life. If you've bought good stocks, hold on to them for 3 months. Unless there are corporate governance issues, you don't need to rebalance. And what we've actually tried this in our back test to say, okay, what we build in stop losses, right? Say something falls 30%, you get rid of it, buy something else. What if something goes up 50%, should you sell it? And what we found in both those cases, it actually hurts our returns on average to do it, right? Because things that fall more than average, more than market, on average go up faster than market, right? Unless there is, barring some crazy news or some corporate governance issues. So once you've sold something at 30% loss, you're 70 rupees. Now you have to redeploy it, and that 70 rupees has to run up faster than that stock you just sold. And on average, we found that doesn't happen, right? And same thing. Why would you sell something at 50% that has momentum behind it, right? Why would you cut your winnings? So we don't do either of those things. And sure, if someone is able to arbitrage on it, great, right? There are many ways to make money on the market. I hope they do well. But for us, this seems to work reasonably well, this process. So that's what we continue to follow.
Talking about your client portfolio, it was mentioned that you are currently targeting only HNIs. So do you wish to serve the retail investors in future?
Yes, we do. I think it is part of our medium-term plan over the next 18 months or so to be able to offer, democratize good products, make sure they are available to retail customers. I think it is a question of bandwidth and how we prioritize. I think our priority over the next 2 years is to one, build best-in-class products and build track record behind them, which work across multiple cycles. So, do you have at least 2-3 years of track record on every product you're able to take to retail? And second is you need the right distribution, you need the right support. It's not just selling it to you. After I sell it to you, I also have to service you, right? It takes a lot of, work, etc. So for us, one problem at a time. Right now is a product problem that we're trying to solve, acceptance problem. So that's why, our goal for the next 2 years is 1,000 crores with 1,000 clients. That's laser focus for us. And retail is right after. And hopefully, years, we can go AMC, maybe get a mutual fund license, be able to service thousands of lakhs of retail customers and deliver alpha.
And talking about scaling up, congratulations on your 1.2 million seed funding. So
Thank you.
yeah, so any other things that you are looking to to do in your operation basis so that you can scale up the
Yeah,
business?
yeah, no, absolutely. Most of the money is going to go into hiring. We need to hire, good sales talent, which helps us build distribution pipes. It's important for us to hire best-in-class technology leads, right, who can help build the right products, build the right processes. It's not just the products; it's also how you're selling them. We want to get to a stage where someone can just come online, buy the PMS, seamlessly without having to sign a single piece of paper. So there are lots of things we need to do at the back end, at the front end. So those are the kind of people we want to hire, and of course, building ops, compliance, everything online. So at the end of 2 years, I'm not looking at 1,000 people organization trying to push paper around. That is not really the vision. So most of our money will go into hiring and of course testing out our new products and building distribution.
Following up to the same question, are you looking forward to automating the process of buying and selling through the algorithm themselves?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll do that. I don't know if we'll ever go fully automated at that level. Want to make sure the products are rules based, but I'm not. It's not front and center for me to not place the order with the broker currently. So not for the next 12 to 18 months. But what's exciting is the kind of investors we have on board. We've got India Partners. It's a great venture capital fund. We've got Vijay Kedia on board. He's a very veteran public markets investor. Ajay Nanavati is on the board of Quantum Mutual Fund, and Gopichand Katragadda used to be the CTO of Tata Group. So, having these shareholders gives you automatic access to a board of advisors that is able to help you scale, right? So, Mr. Kedia may tell me more about how to execute than I may have some idea, but there may be something far more efficient that I should be doing. So, I'm looking forward to learning from them and figuring out how to build this at scale. So, currently, my answer to you is no. I don't see me automating this, but I never say never. It can change in the next 2 quarters.
Okay, so although AI helps to reduce human errors, so what are the disadvantages currently that you see using AI?
Yeah. See, disadvantages with generally using technology is what's the kind of data you got that you're, crunching. It's garbage in, garbage out, right? If you have, crappy data, if you have data that's not clean, it's not going to give you great results. So that's always true. The second is, of course, problems of overfitting and underfitting. Uh, have you given your, are you massaging the data so much that it'll just it's going to tell you what you want to hear. There is in machine learning and AI, overfitting is a big problem where either you're running too many iterations or you're feeding it too much data and then it's no longer reliable. So those are the kind of things we're very very paranoid about in terms of what we're building. And at the end of it, I'm telling it what parameters to look at, right? So while it's training on its own and figuring out how important growth is, I'm telling it growth is important. So my intelligence is going into that. So there is that level of human involvement that remains a risk. Maybe I'm completely wrong and I have no idea what I'm talking about, right? So my system is going to throw out exactly the kind of crap that I'm telling it to throw out. So I guess those are the 2, 3 things. There's human error, there's data error, and then there is overfitting. Those are the things we worry about the most as we build out our own systems.
Okay, so what is your opinion on the future of AI in financial services?
It's that's kind of like 100 years ago, or maybe I don't remember how long ago, asking what the future of computers is in financial services, right? I mean, yeah, they're going to replace calculators. So it's
Mhm.
that's where we are at the moment, which is anything that makes life more efficient will find its way into your home, right? And that is true in financial services as well. That's true in technology. It's like saying, in 5 years, do we believe that there will be less tech shops or more tech shops in the markets? Right? I'm thinking more. That seems to be a reasonable bet to take. So if you know that that's going to happen, that's because there's going to be more acceptance, right? So across the board, not just in the markets, banking is getting disrupted, wealth tech is getting disrupted, lending is getting disrupted, payments has already gone disrupted, and now that's getting disrupted again, right? We moved on to third wave
Mhm.
on payments. So, you know, but like now blockchain is coming in, which is going to disrupt a whole bunch of existing guys already. We're talking about security and, exciting things are happening in quantum security. So over the next 20 years, I think the face of financial services is going to look very different from what it does today. It's not going to be a branch that you're going to and, talking to a guy. Hopefully, it becomes far more efficient. And having
So,
said that, you can't get rid of people when it comes to relationship management. I think that's the most undisruptible part of financial services. Your wealth manager in many ways is your therapist, right? In a bear market, you need someone to call and say, "Ab kya ho raha hai?" You can't scream at a laptop. So I think there are enough parts where human touch is very important, and that's not going away. You can make processes efficient, but I don't know if you can do away with someone to deal with emotions of the end investor.
so following up to the to this thing that what are the key skills that you see in demand for finance students?
Uh, Not just finance. I think learning how to code at least one language is becoming a very essential life skill. Everyone needs to sort of be, programmatically literate, if you will. I started very late, but I've been learning Python for the last year or so because I should be able to read my own code, right? So I think that is 101 in terms of what you should be doing. What's very sad is how important investing is for all of us in all our lives, and it's not taught in schools, right? I'm hoping but now increasingly you're seeing younger and younger people starting to at least educate themselves on how to invest. So those are 2-3 life skills you need to know how to invest, know asset allocation, know how to code. Those would be my advice to finance students as they're starting out.
So this brings me to the last question. What are the key learnings on your entrepreneurial journey, and what are the advice that you'd like to give to the millennials that are in the fintech space?
I don't need to give them any advice. Usually, most fintech startups you're seeing are all started by millennials, and they're doing a pretty great job in any case. But what I have learned is sales is hard. You need a very thick skin to one startup, to sell yourself, and three, know how to handle rejection, and be okay with failure, right? Be okay with putting yourself out there, and most importantly, पूछने में क्या जाता है? Like, पूछ लो ना. What will they say? They'll say no only, right? But do it. Be persistent. I guess very generic, but those are genuinely the things that have worked for us at Upside. It's not been an easy journey, right? We've been doing this for 3 years. But I'm glad to where we've gotten so far.
That should be all. Thank you for your time. It was great being with you. Have a great week ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Vishal. Thanks, FinTech Forum. It was lovely talking to you guys. Good luck. Take care.